Senator John McCain was another of those reacting to the summit. He said today's press conference in Helsinki was one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president in memory. The damage inflicted by President Trump's naivete, egotism, false equivalence, and sympathy for autocrats is difficult to calculate. But it is clear that the summit in Helsinki was a tragic mistake. Joining us now is Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island. He is the ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, that committee of which Mr. McCain is the head. Senator, thank you so much for joining us here. I imagine, although I'm not certain, that you would echo Senator McCain's sentiments there.
I agree with Senator McCain. Today was a disaster. Trump was acting more like Putin's press secretary than President of the United States. This is the first time I can recall an American president taking the word of a Russian autocrat over the word of his own intelligence officials. These are gentlemen, men and women who he appointed, who have looked closely at the evidence. In fact, as recently as last week, Dan Coates indicated, he's the Director of National Intelligence, that the Russians are still operating and attacking our system. And not to call out Putin on that, in fact, to essentially absolve him of any blame is irresponsible, reckless, and as Senator McCain pointed out, disgraceful.
Well, Senator, we are getting a lot of rebukes from a number of different parties on both sides. But what would you say to people who say there was no real significant, concrete thing that came out of this? It was just words. It was just a meeting. Why are people getting all worked up about this? What would you say to that?
Words have consequences. What essentially the president communicated to Putin was all's forgiven. Your invasion of Crimea, your shooting down of a civilian aircraft, your activities in Syria, bombing individuals, all of that is the past. It can't be in the past. So we're talking about someone who systematically, I'm talking about Putin, ordered his intelligence operations to penetrate our country, to disrupt our election, who continues to do that according to our intelligence officials. That can't be just passed over and shrugged off as the president did. So this is not simply words. This is a green light. They can do, in fact, I think he sort of left the impression with Putin, he can get away with anything as far as the president is concerned.
And so, as Lisa mentioned, there has been pretty broad condemnation of the press conference today, of President Trump's tenor towards Putin. What recourse, though, is there for members of Congress beyond words? What do you plan to do and your colleagues plan to do, perhaps on both sides of the aisle, in order to move forward from here and maybe roll it back or somehow do some damage control?
Well, we've already been trying to do that. Last week, I was very pleased when the Senate supported my motion to instruct the conferees about the importance of NATO, 97-2. We also previously passed sanctions against Russia, 98-2. So we can take action, but it is very frustrating when the President of the United States is frustrating the bipartisan, overwhelming bipartisan support of the Senate and the House, but particularly the Senate, and also just dismisses his own intelligence people. I can't emphasize this enough. These are not appointees of Barack Obama or George W. Bush. These are the men and women he chose to lead American intelligence, and they're telling them that the Russians are continuing to do this. They will do it if they have the opportunity, and the president's giving them every opportunity.
Yeah. Senator, so President Trump was just coming off the meeting with NATO leaders and then met with Vladimir Putin. Is there anything that President Trump has done over the past few days during these meetings that you agree with and that you think is good?
I think he's conducted himself in a way that has set back the alliance dramatically. He creates these problems and then he appears to solve them. He walks in and says, I've got them to double their contribution, when in fact, a few minutes later, the President of France comes out and says, no, we're staying with our resolution of the Wales conference several years ago. We're trying to reach 2% by 2024. It's this behavior where he creates a crisis, and then he solves it, he says, then he moves on. But what he's left with our allies is this deep suspicion that he will not be there and we will not be there for them when they need help. I think it's particularly sensitive when you get to the Baltics. They are looking literally across the border at the Russians, and he's signaling to the Russians, you know, I agree with you, Putin, et cetera. That is very disconcerting, very, very disconcerting to our allies. And the strength of our post-Cold War, post-World War II has been our alliances, and he's threatening them.
Senator, just quickly here, as you say, our allies are dismayed. Many of you in Congress are dismayed by the summit today. 538 puts Trump's approval rating right now at around 42%. So still, it ain't bad. Is that something that gives him ammunition, if you will, or allows him this kind of behavior, and also prevents those in Congress from doing more to, again, sanction him or hold back these kinds of comments?
Well, this just transcends sort of popularity ratings and approval ratings and polling numbers. This is about the sworn obligation of the President of the United States to defend this country, literally, and defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. But in this case, you have a country, Russia, who conducted, at the direction of Putin, an attack, a cyber attack and a social media attack on our democracy, and the president's sort of shrugging it off. I think in that sense, it's not about poll numbers, it's about accepting responsibility of being president.